Are you renting out your property for the first time or wondering how you can become a landlord for the first time? Then we're going to answer all your questions in this video. Hi everyone, Ugo Rinze with Onyx Property Consultants powered by Keller Williams. Thanks for watching my YouTube video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell because we put out weekly content talking about the London property market, answering all your questions, whether you're thinking about buying, selling, renting, or managing property in this fabulous city. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about if you're considering renting out your property for the first time or how to become a landlord for the first time. I'm a London-based property agent and I help clients buy, sell, rent, or manage property. So I've got perspective coming from different points of view. So wanted to share with you some of my top tips and things to think about if you're a landlord for the first time, or perhaps you've been landlord with one or two properties and thinking about building your portfolio. So let's get into it. The first thing you should think about when you're buying a property is a buy-to-let mortgage. A buy-to-let mortgage is not the same as an owner-occupied mortgage. So you definitely want to be able to understand the different types of mortgages, what types of restrictions there might be associated with those mortgages. The other thing to consider is what type of property, because it might impact the mortgage that you can get. Whether it's a single family property, say a 1 or 2 bedroom flat, is it a HMO, houses of multiple occupancy, where it might be 3, 4, 5 or more units or beds in the property, and they're going to have their own restrictions and compliance rules, but also could affect the mortgage that you get. The other one that I've definitely seen is when you might look to buy and rent out your property as a corporate or short let. That's definitely going to impact the type of mortgage you can get and also your insurance. So insurance is the other thing you're going to need to think about, not just from the right type of insurance, but how much that insurance might cost. We manage properties for some of our landlords as corporate or short let, and I know that there's additional insurance we have to put in place that actually lines up to the nightly rate that we're able to charge, and that definitely adds an additional cost. The other thing to think about is where you might look to buy your property, and that might have implications on whether you're going to be prepared to manage that property for yourself or might need a local lettings agent or property agent to help you find the tenant, do the tenant referencing, administration, and then the ongoing property management. It's one thing if you're a working professional and you live in, say, Northwest London, but you might look to buy a property in Southeast London where the yields and the rental return might be a lot better. Logistically, that's going to be a challenge if your tenants are calling for different maintenance issues. So you definitely want to factor in the cost of using a lettings agent or property management agent to look after your property. Leading into that is the whole process for finding the tenants. One of the things that I think landlords often underestimate is how important the tenant referencing process is and how actually there are real restrictions in terms of what you can and cannot do. There's a whole right to rent guidelines that you have to stay in compliance to that have heavy fines if you haven't even verified the nationality of someone and that they have a right to rent in the UK. The other things you definitely want to go and check is the tenant worthiness of the tenant. Do they have a history? Are they, of credit worthiness such that you want them in your home? Also, how many people are going to be living in that property? And do you have all the names and have they been identified as occupants into the property? The other thing to think about with the recent changes in the landlord and the tenant fee ban that took place on the 1st of June is what types of deposits you're going to be able to hold and the fact that they need to be held in a government-sponsored tenant deposit scheme. So there's a lot of regulations and restrictions that go along with managing a property. You definitely want to know what that is and not just assume you can keep the money in your bank account or not actually have it registered properly. And that brings me to, again, I've mentioned it before, the idea of compliance. One of the things I think in the UK, Being a landlord is heavily restricted. So whether it's gas safety checks, EPCs, there are a lot of things you need to make sure you're keeping in compliance with on an annual and regular basis, such that the government it says that you are maintaining this property properly for the health and safety of your tenants. That's even before we get into finding the right property for you. I've mentioned a little bit about areas and where you might think about owning the property from a logistics perspective, but it's definitely going to impact the yield you're going to get. One of the things we often struggle with in London is where to get the best yields for my clients. London, given the property prices and how strong a market's been over the last several decades, it does mean that investors and buy-to-let owners have a harder time getting the rental yield that might warrant owning the property and holding it long term. So you definitely want to make sure that you're factoring in not just the cost of owning the property, but managing it in compliance, because that's going to impact your yield. And also how much you want to put into looking after that property. One of the recent changes we've also seen is the reduction in the mortgage interest you can offset against your taxes. That's having dramatic effect on the return many of our landlords are seeing, and it's actually giving them pause to think, does owning this property still make sense? So you want to factor in the economics of it as well. There was a wear and tear allowance that's also been taken away. So you want to make sure you look at all the costs of owning a property, managing it, looking after it. Personally, I own several properties, and I know the benefit of having a source of passive income and how that can help build long-term wealth. So I'm definitely a supporter of owning properties, but I also recognize it isn't for the faint of heart. Some years are going to be great, some years might not be great. One of the things we're seeing, especially in London, is that rental yields that some of the rents that my landlords got in the past is not necessarily what they're able to get today, especially as there's more new builds that's coming online and renters have choice. So again, that's something you want to think about when you're looking at the property you're going to buy, is what are your tenants looking for? What type of properties? And beyond just the things we've already talked about is making sure you keep that property in good condition, and because that will certainly impact the amount of rent you can get over time. Owning a property is a living, breathing investment. It means that perhaps after a few years you might have to be painting new walls, changing carpets, updating it and refreshing it so that it continues to be appealing for potential tenants. I hope that's giving you a taste of some of the things you need to think about if you're going to be renting a property for the first time or letting out a property as a first-time landlord. If you have any other questions, make sure you comment on this video. Let me know if you liked it. And if there's any other topics you want me to be covering, make sure to get in touch. That's Ugo Renze with Onyx Property Consultants, powered by Keller Williams. Bye for now.